Hello, welcome to the Afcon 2021 preview show for the Honest Football Podcast. I'm Craig Savage, and with me are my African experts, Charlie Betts and Daniel Cody. The 2021 African Cup of Nations starts this weekend. It's 2021, even though we're in 2022, and this tournament should have originally been in 2020. And it's our hosts, Cameroon, this year. And let's start off with Group A. It's Cameroon, the hosts. They've got Burkina Faso, Cape Verde, and Ethiopia. Charlie, start with you. Your thoughts on this group?
Well, just really quickly, the inverted commas experts will probably be disproven in the next few sentences. But I'll kick off, Dan, if it's all right, with Cameroon. And I think, to be honest, there's some big names in there. You've got Choupo-Moting and Akambe from Lyon and people like that. I think they'll win the group at Akansa, to be honest. I think they've got probably one of their more straightforward groups. But there have been a bit of an issue in the build-up. I think the midfield is probably one of the best in the tournament, but defensively, I do have a few worries about them. But I do think the group they're in, especially as hosts, will get two wins in the first two wins. I think that leaves the pressure off of them, and whether they get through the group, the knockout stages will be waiting to see. But for me, group win is Cameroon.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the only thing I'm going to try and put a spin on as we go along, because we're championship predictions largely, I'm going to bring the championship feel to it. So for Middlesbrough fans, James Saliki's on loan from Rennes. He is in the squad for them. The other interesting bit really is Anana coming back from suspension a couple of months ago. He's back into the squad. And you mentioned the midfield class. Zambo Anguissa of Napoli, quality player. I love Syria. And Clinton and G for Spurs fans, an old name from the past. But Cameroon are known for playing good high-tempo possession football. So how far they go, I don't know, but they should be a joy to watch. And I agree, they'll win the group.
And let's move on to Burkina Faso.
The big name that people in this country will probably go over is Bertrand Traore. They recently, which is probably quite a revolutionary move in the politest way possible with the budgets that a lot of African teams have, they brought in a sports psychologist. And I could just sort of see in a weird way that might have a positive impact. You're talking about not a lot of disruption amongst other teams, and maybe just that consistency. The mental side of the game is so much more important. And I think particularly in this tournament, and I actually think there'll be a surprise. I think they've got a bit of consistency about them. So I think I've got them down for second in the group, which, given the other two teams, could be a bit of a fight between those three. But I think Burkina Faso might just edge it.
Yeah, I just about thought they might be second as well. You mentioned Traore. He leads what is a very young squad of attacking talent, certainly. But the bit I'm worried about for them, to be honest, where I'm choosing between them and one other, is the bite in the middle of the park. I'm not sure that they've got that quality in centre midfield, but ultimately it's a group where any one of the other three could go through, and I guess many have predicted them to be fighting out with Cape Verde, but Bertrand Traore is going to be key for sure.
Let's move on to Cape Verde, their third appearance in the tournament.
There's a cracking story. We haven't got time to talk about it now, but if you do go on the BBC website of Roberto Lopez, who actually plays for Shamrock Rovers, and he's been called up to the Cape Verde side. It is a very good read. Very young side, and they're pulling players in from all over the place, which looks great on paper, but that cohesion, I just can't see it being there. However, I think they might just have a little bit too much for the last team in the group, Ethiopia. So I've got them down third, but I think, to be honest, I can't see them getting anywhere near Cameroon. Obviously, I think we just mentioned that Burkina Faso might just have a little bit more experience, albeit both two young sides. So for me, third place.
Yeah, I had them initially quite close to Burkina Faso, but like you mentioned, it's not just the fact that they've recruited a lot of players from European nations in recent years. If you go through the list, there's a lot that haven't got many caps. They're not ones that have been able to bed in for 2 or 3 years, which we'll come to a bit later on with some other sides. So I think that might be the ultimately deciding factor. I was going to mention Roberto Lopez. You've done it as well. It's a great story. The only thing I'd say to watch out for Cape Verde is the wingers. They've got Ryan Mendes, an experienced winger, was formerly at Nottingham Forest a few years back, and Alessandro Semedo on the other side. So as much as I don't think they'll get many results, I think they'll be quite exciting to watch in wide areas, which in the Euros was incredibly effective.
And finally, the final team in the Group A is Ethiopia, their first tournament since 2013. Will they be the whipping boys in this group, though?
Great stat there, Sam. I don't know if they'll be the whipping boys. I just can't see where the wins are going to come from. And I think it's a bit like the Euros now, that the 6 third best qualifiers get through. So, they are going to have to push forward. If they lose the first 2 games, there's a small chance of sneaking third. And I just don't think they've quite got enough there. Although Abubakar Nasir, who's top scorer in the Ethiopian League, might be one to watch out for. Known for their one-touch football, but physically I can't see it. But I will say it's great for the country and, the infrastructure that it will bring.
Yeah, I think they'll ultimately end up finishing last in the group, but don't count them out against Cape Verde for sure. They've only got 2 players playing out their football outside Ethiopia domestically, so they're a bit of an unknown quantity. They're quite hard for us to do research on. I have watched a few of their clips from qualifying that. They play really interesting, strict 1 and 2 touch counter-attacking football. Like the amount of one-touch moves you see, it's quite fascinating to watch. It's very unique. The other striker I was going to pick out was Katane Kabedi, who is 32 international goals. He's their top international scorer, and he's going to be crucial if they want to get third. And as Charlie mentions, 4 of those 6 teams are going to get through in third place. So it's a great opportunity for sides like Ethiopia if they can get that one win.
Let's move on to Group B, and we have got Senegal, Zimbabwe, Guinea, and Malawi. Let's start off with Senegal. They were the runners-up in 2019. Do you think they'll go one further and win the tournament?
Yeah, I think the thing is, Craig, they're one of 2 or 3 very big favourites. And as you mentioned, we're looking at it from a championship, an English, a European point of view. There's so many stars to watch. I mean, the spine of the team is probably the strongest in the tournament. You've got Mendy, one of the best keepers in the world. Koulibaly's a world-class centre-half at his best. Idrissa Gueye and Kouyaté are rock-solid midfielders. And then Ismaila Sarr and Sadio Mane don't need introduction. They've been the top FIFA-ranked Afcon side for 3 years. So evidence would suggest they're one of the strongest in the tournaments. I can't see them not getting to at least the semi-finals at a canter. And in this group, it should be very comfortable for them. I don't know if they're going to win it though, Craig. I'll come to that later.
I think they'll win the whole thing. And I'll go through why maybe one of the favourites later on might not. But I agree with Dan. At the very, very least, I think the country and the FA will be hugely disappointed if they don't make the semi-finals at the very least. I just think with that consistency, and you talk about some big game players who've won some big trophies recently. So for me, I think there might be enough to carry them over. But I'll maybe go through later on. But for me, I think there might be the winners in that group. The winners of the whole competition. But they'll win the group at a canter. That'll be done by the first 2 games.
Let's move on to Zimbabwe. They've never gone out of the group stages in the tournament. This is a perfect opportunity for them to get through.
Yeah, they're one of a couple of sides, though, that have got, unfortunately, it is a familiar aspect of African football. There is often problems off the pitch in the federation. So they're actually potentially facing an international ban soon. Their board have already been suspended. It's a bit chaotic, the whole situation. And the biggest thing is they're missing some of their star players through injury. We were having a quick chat about Brendan Galloway before, former Luton playing out at Plymouth. And the big one's Nakamba at Villa. The rock in the centre of midfield, not having him there is going to make such a difference. But there are still some exciting players. A couple of championship ones. Jordan Zamura's had a great year at Bournemouth. He's one to watch out for them. David Moyo of Hamilton, another player that's played lots in the EFL. And the star man up front is Tino Kadewere, who's a good player for Lyon. And he'll be looking to be supported by Luton Town's very own, as Craig Scarf in the background, Admiral Musquay, who will be there for his first Afcon tournament. So good luck to him from a Luton point of view.
Yeah, I've not got much to add. I actually think they'll finish bottom. I think the disarray off the pitch, there was a thing about who was manager, like the FA had appointed a manager, but then the sporting minister hadn't appointed. It was a very, very messy situation. And actually, from a football perspective, they're going into the tournament in woeful form. They've won one of the last 18. So for me, I can't see anything but a team that's going to finish bottom of the group, unfortunately. And what happens after that, goodness knows. But as long as they keep playing football, because unfortunately, the ban in African football seems to get rolled out far too quickly, in my opinion. So as long as there's still teams playing football, that's the important part.
The third team in there is Guinea. How do you see them doing, Codes?
Well, it's going to be quite an interesting one because Naby Keita is obviously the most familiar name, a Liverpool superstar in the middle, and they've got a good midfield on paper. They're another side, though, that have just been plagued by off-the-pitch issues. So their new manager was previously the assistant. The previous manager got sacked halfway through the World Cup qualifying campaign. But this new one, since he's been manager, hasn't actually won a game, a competitive match. So it's quite an issue where they've got a good side on paper, but it's just never clicked. And I do wonder if it's going to gel for this. I'm probably going to disagree with Charlie. I think second spot's open in this group and it could be anyone. On paper, it should be Guinea. But I wouldn't be shocked if Zimbabwe or Malawi got through here. I think it's going to be one of those groups where you've got Senegal away on 9 and maybe the other 3 chucked on 3 beating each other. But it's a massive campaign for Guinean football. And with the players they've got compared to their previous generations, it has to be the one they take advantage and get through to the last 16, maybe even the last 8.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying. I think there's still a bit more. He's dropped, the manager dropped Kamara. They had a midfield 3 of Diawara, Kamara and Keita, and for whatever reason, it just wasn't working. On paper, that should be a strong midfield 3. And it's a bold move. Whether that's caused a bit of unrest, it's come across as quite a divisive move that Kamara was identified as the one who was upsetting the apple cart a little bit in that midfield 3. But maybe with him gone, albeit a divisive move, it might give a bit of stability. So I think they might just have enough. I've got them down as second, but only just. And, I think Malawi, we'll go on to a minute, will run them close. But I think that quality of Keita and people like that might just carry them through. But I don't expect much in the last 16 from them.
And the last team is Malawi. And once again, they haven't got past the group stage. But as we said, with the extra third place, gives them a really good chance to actually get out of the group.
Yeah, absolutely. But I don't know what it is with this group. It's just all off the pitch chaos throughout bar Senegal. So This team's almost the opposite way. So the manager was relegated to assistant to make room for a Romanian coach, Mario Marinica. So he's coming and will now be in charge of this tournament. He's also the technical director at the federation. So there's all sorts going on there. But the squad plays largely at domestic level, a bit like Ethiopia, quite hard to do a lot of research. But they've got 3 attacking stars who play in the South African League, which is obviously a well-known league, a very good standard. And I think they could maybe spring a surprise, So I genuinely don't know who's going to get second in this group. I think it's going to be absolutely fascinating. But ultimately, whoever's in third won't get through because I think the points total is going to be low.
Yeah, I've got them in third as well. The only thing I was going to add is large portion of their players play for a team called, now forgive me on this, B Forward Wanderers, who are a domestic side. But just maybe having that consistency of having a number of players who play in the same team, albeit whatever level, might be enough. I think they'll get into third, as I mentioned. Well, like you said, I don't think they'll get through on that. And they're going into it with 1 win in 6, so probably not in the best of form. Out of all the groups around, this one the hardest to predict outside of Senegal. Senegal was the clear sort of favourite, but after that, you could sort of toss a coin as to who comes second and third in this one, I think.
Let's move on to Group C, where we have Morocco, Ghana, Gabon, and Comoros. Morocco first, got some very good players, some English-based that we know very well in the Championship and in the Premier League, Charlie. It's going to be tighter group than we actually think.
Yeah, I've got this down as the group of death. I mean, it's probably been labelled that by other people. I've not obviously invented that term, but they are one of the favourites. But there's been a little bit of off the pitch with Hakimi Ziyech. Forgive my pronunciation, plays for Chelsea. Had a bit of a fallout with that manager, and I don't quite think they've replaced that creative spark with him not being there and being in one of the favourites. They have obviously got Hakimi, who you know about from PSG, and Romain Saiss as well, who speak for themselves. I just wonder if that little bit of the thing, I've got them down to win the group. I don't think they'll go as far as people think, though. I think they'll, like similar to last competition, I think they got put out by South Africa or something like that in the quarters. I can just sort of see it happening again because, again, that little bit of off the field stuff and, you know, one of your best players falling out with the manager doesn't bode well for me. But I think they'll just about win the group of death, and we'll go through why in a bit.
Yeah, I think we said about the Ziyech situation being a little bit bizarre, but that's not particularly unusual in African football. It happened with Nigeria a few years ago, and it worked out well for them, resting a few of the star players as such. They've still got loads of familiar names, as well as the ones Charlie mentioned. I just wanted to give a couple that might be that Hakim Ziyech figure, which Ilias Chair, who's been absolutely incredible for QPR this year, it's a real chance for him to become a superstar. And I would argue, if he succeeds in this tournament, if he continues his form with QPR, he could be a man for a massive move in the summer. Sofiane Boufal, former Premier League player, another one that might be able to fill that void as well. On his day, very tricky. But as Charlie mentioned with Hakimi and as Adam Messina from Watford on the other side, I think the fullbacks are going to be so crucial to the way they play because a lot of the rest of their squad is quite young.
Let's move on to Ghana and Thomas Partey in a very strong Ghana squad. Surely could be one of the favourites to win the tournament. But how key is Thomas Partey into this squad?
I think you say favourite to win on the tournament. I don't know if they are. I think, Thomas Partey is a great player. It's a very young Ghana side compared to previous years. They've got, you know, Ayew and Mensah, basically the two survivors of that golden generation, you know, 10 years ago and the whole World Cup run and all of that. They just don't seem to have that robustness that I think Ghana have had before, where they could dig in deep against some of these European sides, as they showed against in the World Cup, and how important that is in Afcon. They've got a lot of young players in there. I mean, one to look out for is Abdul Issaka, who's 17 actually, and he's been flying in the Ghana Premier League. So whether that's enough to kind of through, I think they'll finish second in the group. Again, though, they flattered to see they got beat by Tunisia in the quarterfinals last year. And I'm big, you know, I worked in Ghana for a very short period of time, volunteered, so I didn't get paid for it. And so I have a slight bias towards them, but I just don't think they've got the quality to get to the semi-finals. I think there's 4, maybe even 6 stronger teams than them. So for me, second in the group, but not much past the quarters for me.
Yeah, I don't really know what to make of the favourites tag because they've got one of the strongest 11s on paper, but the squad probably isn't as deep as it has been for the last 15 years with Ghana. There's been so much talent there the last few years, and now it's a little bit, as Charlie says, reliant on young, unpredictable players off the bench. As well as mentioning Thomas Partey, who obviously is a key player, the experienced Wakasso's alongside him. But the fullbacks, you've got the Reading duo, Baba Rahman and Andy Yeardon playing the fullback positions. Daniel Amati's been in great form for Leicester in recent weeks. I think he's going to be as important into their side. Might even play from centre-half, given the fact they've got a couple of good centre-mids already. The Ayew brothers are still so important to them. Charlie's mentioned the couple of teenagers they've got in an attack. And a quick mention that between the sticks is often a problem for some of the African nations. Swindon's Joe Woolacott may well go in as first choice. He's one of the keepers in the squad. So an EFL one to look out for as well.
Yeah, and let's move on to a Gabon. They have got Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang currently at Arsenal, not playing for Arsenal, but it'd be nice to get some game time for him. Obviously, they're going to have to rely on him, Charlie.
Yeah, and you wonder how much of the impact of not playing, as you know, recently is going to have on that. I've actually, surprisingly, because I've got a bit of a surprise in a minute, I've got them down as fourth. I think the whole Aubameyang, the pressure on him, where is his head at? I don't know. That's obviously up to him to answer. The coach, obviously, as well, he's left out Didier and Dong, and I think that's caused a few ripples amongst and unrest, particularly in the media. And you know how important like the media and to a point, even some of the governing body have over the teams in particularly in the Afcon, you know, in that sense. So that's not gone down well at all. Whether that affects the players in the squad as well, the mental output on that. So for me, I've plumped for them to finish fourth. I can't see much wrong, to be honest.
Yeah, I think they're reliant on probably 2 or 3 players getting them a result that they need and scraping them through the group. It's going to come down to, in my opinion, it's going to come down to Gabon v Comoros for third place. And it'll be, can one of them pick up a point against someone else? The only thing I want to point out with Gabon, I know it's not the highest quality, but they have got one of the most experienced defensive lines in terms of caps. So I don't know if that consistency, that stability will maybe help them. They've got youthful looking attack with Ulrike, a young Brighton player, barely played for them, but he's available as a sort of wild card off the bench. And the other man that's key for them is Mario Lemina. As Charlie mentioned, without Didier and Dong there, the former Southampton and Fulham man, there's going to be so much pressure on him in the midfield battle. And ultimately, going on to Comoros in a minute, it's going to be his battle against someone else that decides the group for me.
Yeah, exactly that. Comoros, a debut for them as well. I won't say they're going to be whipping boys, but obviously they're going to go out there first ever tournament, go out and enjoy yourselves. But they, as you said, they could spring a surprise, and if they're going to rely on probably beating Gabon in their game.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't want to blow our own trumpet. We're one of the few podcasts 2 years ago predicted Madagascar to do what they did and surprise the tournament. And I think this has gone under the radar. I think Comoros in a very similar situation. A lot of expats from France, and we spoke about the impact that had on Madagascar. Normally quite, you know, these two quite small countries, but have a big pool to choose from if they search that, they have to cast a net wider into Europe. And actually, along the way, they draw with Ghana, Cameroon, Egypt, and Morocco, admittedly in friendlies and some in qualifiers. They've drawn with 4 big teams there. So defensively, they're a stout side. Maybe haven't got as much going forward as what other teams in the competition have. But to have that stoutness is quite a rarity in African football, to be brutally honest. And I was so close to picking them to second. And there's still part of me that thinks that there might just be that wild card, a bit like Madagascar. A lot of players who have been written off the sort of, you know, they're just going, you know, there to have a good time and stuff. But for me, I think they'll spring a massive surprise. I think if they don't finish second, they'll finish third and get out of the group in, you know, one of the third places for me. So for me, probably one of the biggest surprises of the tournament. I've got them down as third, but literally only just. And I could have, again, tossed a coin between them and Ghana, to be brutally honest.
Well, either me and Charlie have done the same research, or we're both in inspired form like the last Afcon. Let's hope so, because I think both debutants will do pretty well. To give a bit of a spoiler for later on, I had Comoros very close for third and second as well, because I actually think that this is going to be a really tight group between the top 3. I don't think Morocco or Ghana will run away with it. Ultimately, I think all 3 will get through. I know there's a lot of the players that have come from French heritage, obviously, that's been mentioned before, but they have all got sort of 15, 20 caps bar 1 or 2. They've got a bit of an understanding of playing together. Just a quick one for UK fans. Fuad Bashiru, formerly of Morton, Greenock Morton and Nottingham Forest. And they've got an experienced attacking line. So it might not be the highest scoring, but they've got experience. Are we going to get the Kevin Davis, the player who can hold the ball up, win those silly fouls? And that could be so crucial for relieving pressure on the defence. So I'm banking on Comoros to get through as well. Whether it's in second or third, I don't know.
Anyway, let's move on to Group D, and that is Egypt, Nigeria, Sudan, and Guinea-Bissau. Let's start with Egypt. Mo Salah, obviously one of the best players in the world. I worry about this Egypt side, Codes.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Yes, they've got one of the best players in the world. Yes, they've still got 2 or 3 good, familiar Premier League names. But it's not as strong of an Egypt squad as we've had in previous years, particularly defensively. Now, I actually think, I know this sounds ridiculous with Mo Salah, with Mohamed El Neni, with Trezeguet from Villa in the side. I actually think the former West Brom man, Ahmed El Hagazi, is the most important man in this squad this Afcon, because he has got to hold it together a pretty inexperienced and a pretty ropey defensive line. And he is that one experienced talisman back there. So I think he's as important as Salah. I think the only positive for Egypt is obviously they've got Carlos Queiroz in charge, and we've seen it before with Iran at a World Cup. He sets up teams very, very structured, very disciplined. And while we might not get to see the best of Salah, I think Egypt will ultimately sneak enough 1-0s, 0-0s, 1-alls to go a long way into the tournament. So they'll get through. I think they'll win the group because I don't rate Nigeria too much, but I don't think it's going to be thrilling, exciting, and seeing hat-tricks from Salah and the likes, which some Premier League fans might expect.
Yeah, I hope this Sky Sports investment doesn't backfire on them, because this is essentially who they've come to steal the games from free-to-air TV. But anyway, that's another rant for another time. It's to see Mohamed Salah. But I completely agree. If you go back to 2019, I mentioned earlier about a team playing South Africa. It was actually Egypt who got put out by South Africa, got beaten 1-0. And I watched the game, and essentially South Africa man-marked Salah out the game, and Egypt really didn't have much of a plan B. And I just worry that might be a similar case here, that they'll stutter through the groups, like you say, they'll sort of stumble through. I can't see them getting to the last four, though, because I think there'll be teams with a better game plan who, if you can nullify him and possibly El Neni, I don't really see where else it's coming from for Egypt. So they'll win the group, but I don't see much more from them out of that, to be brutally honest. No plan B.
Next team, obviously, they're playing first game, will be probably the toughest. It is Nigeria. And Codes, will Watford let Nigerian players play?
Oh, well, this situation with Emmanuel Dennis, look, I don't want to get into the club v country thing. It's pretty easy for us to say that the players should be able to play for their country, and Afcon's been really disrespected over here. But Emmanuel Dennis will be a miss, presuming he's not going to be there. He's not in the final squad. They have still got a load of quality talent. Look, Kelechi Iheanacho's not in great form this season, but he's a good player. Odion Ighalo, always a handful at international level, a good target man. And the former Leicester man, Ahmed Musa, got pace to burn and can play off either side as an inside forward too. Defensively, you mentioned the other Watford one, Truce de Kong. It looks like he's going to be involved. Semi Ajayi is another defender in there. Obviously, didn't quite do well in the Premier League last year, but a solid championship defender. And then you've got the likes of Ola Aina and Kenneth Omuro playing in Europe at the moment, but former Chelsea youth players. It's a strong defence. I'd argue they've maybe got the strongest back four in the tournament, but perhaps going forward is where the lack of depth is. And certainly in midfield, they've got four good midfielders, Ndidi, Iwobi, Aribo and Onyeka from Brentford. And those four need to stay fit, or I think it's going to be a tough tournament, because there's only 6 official midfielders in the squad and a bit of a lack of depth in that position. Not the most balanced. And he changed coach a month before the tournament as well, which I'm sure Charlie will mention.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, 4 weeks ago, they sacked Gerhard Royer. So, he's an experienced African, sort of, he's been around a few different nations. But yeah, I was just going to add, really, I completely agree with what you're saying, Dan. I just think there's 6 or 7 good players in there, but they just don't seem to have that depth that you would normally associate with Nigeria. And that's where they've been successful, not just in the Afcon, but even in previous World Cups and things like that. They've gone beyond that 11 with the quality, and I just don't really see that. So, yeah, they'll get through the group in second, but you're going to pick up knocks, you're going to pick up injuries. It's tough conditions to play in. I just don't see that depth when you need to rotate the squad a little bit. I don't think they've got that there. So for me, second place, but again, not much in the groups, in the knockout stages.
So that's what you guys probably think the top 2 is already sorted. Let's get to Sudan, their first tournament since 2012. Need to pick up points probably against Guinea-Bissau, but they could probably spot a party as well.
Yeah, I was going to say they've already sprung a surprising qualifier, and they beat South Africa to get here, which in the grand scheme of things is a massive shock in terms of the current footballing world. The entire squad plays its football domestically by one player, a bit like we mentioned with Ethiopia and the likes earlier. They are big underdogs. I'm just going to say watch out for the striker. It's Mohamed Abdul Rahman. He's a goal scorer. He's a proper poacher. And the only thing I'm basing my logic on here is Lee Clark was managing one of the 2 big sides over in Sudan, in the last year. And he said he was really surprised by the quality there. Now, I don't know if that's just because prior he was at Blythe Spartan struggling in the National League North, or if it's because the league's great. But again, Charlie mentioned it for a side earlier on. Most of their players come from 2 top sides in the domestic league, and that could end up being a benefit. So I wouldn't be shocked if they got 1 result.
Yeah, their nicknames are Secretary Birds, which I think is possibly the best nickname in the whole tournament for me. But yeah, and like Dan said, pipping South Africa, whatever form South Africa are in, you would expect them to still finish above them. So they've got rid of some of the older players. They are lacking experience. I was caught between 3rd and 4th. I think there's just a little bit too much quality in the Guinea-Bissau side, but I don't think there'll be much in it. So I've got them bottom of the group, but they're not going to be the whipping boys or anything like that. They'll definitely pick up a point or 2, I think. So for me, 4th place, but yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying there, Dan.
And the final team is Guinea-Bissau, their 1st straight tournament. That shows a sign of improvement on the pitch.
Yeah, definitely. It's a really good generation for them. They're another side that have got a bit better at recruiting players from elsewhere. A large portion of the squad plays in Portugal 2nd tier at the minute, which again might be a benefit. They're players that are used to being around each other. But a couple of new recruits from UK clubs, which we need to mention for this tournament. So Plymouth, Panuche Camara is one. He's a very good player, had a solid start to the season. But more interestingly, Alawa's Fernandi Mendy, which I just thought was brilliant to see. So I'm looking forward to that. They've not made it past the group stage before, as you mentioned, but it is their third tournament. And the coach is known and often battered in the media for an extremely cautious approach. So I think we might see some low-scoring games in this group because they'll be trying to frustrate Egypt and Nigeria rather than going out to win the game.
Yeah, I agree. Again, another cracking nickname, the Wild Dogs. But yeah, just to back up what Dan was saying, I think they're going into this, they've gone 4 games without a goal. Doesn't bode well when you're going into a tournament. Like you say, they might surprise a draw against Nigeria and possibly a win against Sudan or something like that, and maybe get through as a third place team, possibly. But the lack of goals is really going to hurt them, I think. So I've got them down as a third place, possibly.
And let's get on to Group E, where we have Algeria, the defending champions, Ivory Coast, Sierra Leone, and Equatorial Guinea. Let's start off with the champions, Algeria, Riyad Mahrez, and the boys.
Yeah, obviously they're going into this with this unbeaten run, 33 matches. I mean, the squad speaks for itself. They're quite dynamic. Been known to play 4-4-2, 4-3-3, etc. So for me, I think they'll get to the final. I mentioned I think Senegal might win it, but I think if they'll definitely be finalists. They're just too strong a side. Will they beat Italy's record of 37 matches unbeaten? Yes. They're just, it all seems to fall into place for them. I just think that on the day, maybe in that final against Senegal, they might get nicked. But this group should be a breeze for them. The knockouts, I think they'll walk through as well. So for me, finalists and possibly winners.
Yeah, I think the thing with the Algeria squad that's perhaps different to the others is that it's the most balanced squad, I would say. It's got a lot of quality throughout the picture, a lot of solid players. Solid defence, loads of experience in Europe's top leagues, the likes of Holland, the likes of France, etc. The midfield class, Benaker at Milan's a class act. Really like watching him play. Faguli, a former West Ham man, Charlie will know, another good player at this level. But like you said, they've added to the attacking talent they had. It was always the big front three. Mahrez and Slimani, a massive part of that. Slimani shouldn't be forgotten. He's their top goal scorer still in that squad. But now you've got the likes of Saïd Benrahma, you've got Brahimi, you've got Unas from Napoli. It's a ridiculous, formidable attack. And I don't really see a defence in the tournament that can probably stop them, other than maybe Nigeria, whose attack will let them down. So Algeria, for me, are one of the favourites to go all the way. And like Charlie said, I'll be very surprised if they're not in the final.
Well, Daniel Coe is talking about a balanced squad for Algeria. Surely Ivory Coast squad with your Wilfried Sahars, Nico Pepe, Sebastian Haller, who is on form at the moment for Ajax, and defensive Ajax Boy, hopefully he's fit for that, and Willy Boy that plays for Wolves. Surely they've got to be a good chance of winning this tournament as well, Charlie.
On paper, and this is where my issue with Ivory Coast comes in, I think they'll finish second in the group with the other two teams in there. I'm intrigued to see how Haller gets on, because obviously, it didn't probably have the most prolific time at West Ham, but him and Zaha linking up together, that could be one of the most dangerous sort of partnerships in the competition, to be honest, if the way they've been playing domestically. But despite what you're saying about Willy Boly and Eric Bailly, their defensive record as a national team has been horrible. It is that concede goals for fun. And the thing is, for me, they don't have that inspirational figure. And the way they had Drogba, who could have dragged them out, I don't see that necessarily in this Ivory Coast side as much. I don't see that oomph and that inspirational figure that when they've let in another hatful of goals, they're going to outscore. Kevin Keegan approach, if you will. I don't get that. So it's a transition period for them. They'll either be absolutely sublime and possibly even pitch Algeria to the top of the group, which I don't see happening, or they'll be horrendous and bum all the way through to second and get beaten in the last 16. I personally think it'll be the latter. I just don't see that inspiration, because their defence, albeit on paper, is great. In reality, has been terrible. So for me, second, but not much after that.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn a bit like Charlie, because on paper, like Craig mentioned, they're a menace inside. They're absolutely brilliant. They're well balanced. They've got quality everywhere, but the mentality seems to be so far off, and the reality rarely matches in when it comes to game time. I mean, Aurier's the skipper at the moment, another top-class defender on his day. The midfield too should be brilliant. You've got Seri, who's flying at Fulham. You've got Milan's Frank Kessie, who's a wonderful player. And the front three should arguably be one of those that's in the top 2 or 3 of the tournament. If Haller can find his Ajax form, that's what it comes down to this season. Haller's hit a form he's never had before this season, and he's been absolutely world-class, even in the Champions League. If he can provide that, and if, more importantly, the likes of Pepe, Zaha, Seri can provide him with the quality service, Ivory Coast have got a chance to go all the way, because their squad should be able to do it. But there's nothing evidence-wise in the last couple of years to suggest that's going to happen. You could argue they might even struggle for second in the group. It seems like one of those where a lot of great players have been chucked together, but a system has perhaps not been found.
Next up, Sierra Leone. They were the last team to qualify into the tournament all the way back in the 15th of June of last year. It's their first tournament since 1996.
Yeah, I've got them down for third. I think the two teams, even a poor Ivory Coast, might be too much for them. I mean, Key Kamara is one of the standout names. Plays in the MLS. I think it's like 5th all-time goal scorer. There's not really much else. Like we mentioned before, 2 or 3 good players, but outside of that, there's just not that depth there, I think, to get through. And I think they'll get beat quite heavily by Algeria and by, not heavily, but it could be by Ivory Coast. So I can't see them getting through in 3rd place. I think the goal difference will go against them. So unfortunately, in that instance, Sierra will finish 3rd, but I don't see them necessarily getting through.
Yeah, I think as Charlie mentions, probably the better players for them are just coming to the wrong end of their career. Obviously, they've recruited Stephen Coulter, a man well known to a lot of English fans in defence. Their star midfielder, Mido, is a former Bolton player, but he's now 34. He's clubless. Kai Kamara's even over 30, but obviously, again, played in English football and has been brilliant in the MLS for years. Loads of EFL players in this squad, though, and maybe that bit of youth exuberance and a lot of quality will be able to help them out. So you've got Idris Kano at Peterborough, Sully Kai at Wickham, Osman Kakai at QPR, and Wildston's David Sasay. So they could be an outside bet. I'm going to be controversial here. I'm going to bank on them to beat Equatorial Guinea and maybe nick a point off a disjointed Ivory Coast and get through in 3rd place or even 2nd, depending on how Ivory Coast do. The only other thing that's going to be crucial to them, they've got a lot of good attacking players that are playing in Scandinavian football at the minute. So after 26 years away, I'm saying don't write them off. They might sneak to the 16s.
Surely a team you can't write off is Equatorial Guinea. Last time they were in the tournament, they finished 4th in 2015. So surely don't write them off.
The National Thunder, which is easily the best nickname in the whole tournament, in my opinion. But yeah, you say that. The thing is, the best Rolls-Royce midfielder I've seen at West Ham, Pedro Aubameyang, is injured, unfortunately. I've got to be honest, on a side note, I loved watching him. He was the most calmest man on the ball I've ever seen. But one of the other big names, Emilio Uncia, who obviously played in England, he's not actually had a club. He's in the squad, but he's been clubless since the beginning of the season. And you just wonder, I completely agree with what you're saying, Craig, that going into this, they should be doing higher than, should be better than what they are. But there's a lot of players that play for a similar team, but I just don't see that quality. If your best player hasn't played for 3 or 4 months, the other one's probably injured. So I've got them down as 4th. I can't see it going the way that it has done previous years. I think there's 3 other teams in there that might just get the better of them.
Yeah, I'm kind of in agreement with Charlie, to be honest. I know it's their 3rd appearance in the tournament now, that run in 2015. It's the first time they've actually qualified for the tournament. The other 2, they were organiser or part organiser. So it's the first time they've actually made it, you could say, on merit in terms of qualification. Charlie mentioned Obiang's going to be a massive miss. And Sue, it depends what form he's in. He's a leader. He's a talisman. He always seems to perform for his country. But a lot of the team features largely in the 2nd and 3rd tiers of Spain. And it's a side that's going to be hardworking. It will probably be quite well organised. But ultimately, I think it's too much for Nask. And I've got them in 4th place.
And let's get on to the final group, Group F. We have got Tunisia, Mali, Gambia, and Mauritania. Tunisia, they had that Arab Cup not long ago, so that little bit of experience of tournament football will be ideal for them.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It could be helpful. I'm a little bit torn on Tunisia, to be honest, because for the large part, they're a young squad that's in transition. They're not performing incredibly well, but they've still got that reliance on a few experienced stars. I mean, the main one is Wabi Kazri, no doubt about that. He's an international superstar for them. He's going to be so important to what they do. The only question I'm asking is, although it's not the strongest squad, are the amount of young players in the squad going to produce this sort of fearless, unpredictable approach? It's not something we're used to seeing with Tunisia. We're used to them being a really solid defensive team. We look at the likes of Radi Jaidi in years gone by, just powerhouse defenders. But I'm wondering if some of the youngsters, you've got Omar Rekik at Arsenal, Hannibal Mejbri, who's at Manchester United, made his debut at the end of last season. He's played 9 games for his country now. Are they going to be able to produce a fearless approach? I ultimately think this will be a quite disappointing campaign for Tunisia, but I think it'll be a massive benefit by the time the next Afcon comes around, because a lot of those will be well into their 20s then.
Yeah, but they've got a very good manager in Majid Bouguera, so it's a win-win for me.
Deliberately didn't mention it.
I was about to say, if you got Kevin Davison, you have to get Majid Bouguera in there as well. Who you styled your football on, Craig. But what I will say, I agree with Dan. I've gone down a 2nd. Maybe that defensive approach that they're well known for is going to take time to almost coach that out of the national psyche, for the want of a better phrase. I know it's a bit cliched, but I don't quite see it happening this year. But I will say, in the next tournament or 2, I think there'll be a more formidable force. I think this one is just a bit of a transition period. They'll still get through in 2nd. You mentioned about Wabi Kazri. I just think they're still in that defensive mindset. The next thing we'll talk about for me, I've got as an outside bet.
And that team is Mali. I just feel like they've been a bit underrated.
I completely agree. I'm going to make probably all of my bold statements are coming from this group, in fact. I think Mali, outside probably the three favourites, are one of the few sides that could shock the odds and get to the final. I'm going to go that far because the crucial bit is going to come down to the group, actually, because Algeria are going to win Group E. So Mali have to win their group. That's the key part here to start with. Southampton's Gineppo, Brighton's Bissouma, who's going to be at a massive club very soon. They're going to be key players for them. They've got quality in those areas. The one I'm really looking forward to watching is Amadou Haidara from RB Leipzig. I think he's a cracking player. I used to watch the Bundesliga an awful lot. I think he'll be one of the stars of the tournament. They're a solid defence and attack. They've got a lot of players from French football, again, playing at a good level. But the one to watch, the secret one to watch that hasn't been mentioned much is Adama Traore. Not that one, but Adama Traore, who's been playing for Sheriff Tiraspol in the Champions League this year. And I watched him tear Shakhtar Donetsk to shreds a couple of times. He is the one to watch for me. They've got a couple of great players that have gone under the radar. I'm banking on them to win the group. And I think if they get the right draw, they're going to go a long way.
No, I completely agree. I've got them as an outside bet and to go all the way. And the reason being is that the form they're in going into this as well. I mean, in the last 6 games, won 5, drew 1, scored 11 and not conceded a single goal in the last 6 games. That has to count for something, particularly in this tournament football in the middle of the season that a lot of these players are playing in. And this squad it's been kept together quite well, actually. You know, previous years, they're African champions at under 17. They came third in under 20 World Cup in 2015 and 2017 with the majority of this squad. That has to stand for something. That cohesion, that quality of football that they've been playing together for a long time now. I think it has to come to a head. I mean, Ibrahim Kone in Norway as well, he scored 5 goals in the last 6 games. He's in scintillating form. So for me, the form book says they have to get someone near that last 4, really.
Next up is Gambia, their first tournament in the African Cup of Nations. So it's a bit of the unknown for them.
It is, but I mean, I gave it away a bit earlier. I actually think both debutants will do pretty well. And I think we said this in the last Afcon. It tends to happen, to be honest. There's a couple of UK interests in there from the Football League. So we've got Ebu Adams, who's had a really good year at Forest Green. Forest Green obviously flying in League 2. And Ibu Toure, flying fullback from Salford. Otherwise, it's a pretty solid squad. And you know I love Serie A. There's a few really good players from Serie A in this squad. You've got Moussa Barrow from Bologna, who's all action, high quality, can carry the ball brilliantly. Omar Colley is one of the best defenders at Sampdoria. I know that's not saying a huge amount, but he is a very good footballer nonetheless. They're going to be relying on Hassan Cissé for goals. And I think they've got a chance of getting out the group, particularly with the third place as well. I think this is going to be a closer group than people think. I think Mali will top it, and I think Tunisia and Gambia will be close. The only issue is if there's too many draws and they don't get to that 4 points, which I think is what they'll need. But I'm banking on them to get out the group, both for the new sides.
Yeah, I agree. And actually coming into it, you mentioned about Hassan Cissé, sorry. I mean, he's been lethal for FC Zurich as well. But they actually topped the qualifying group with Gabon, DR Congo and Angola, who would normally, particularly last 2, would be stalwarts of the Afcon competition. So to finish above them, they've been a bit underrated going into this, similar to Comoros, as we mentioned earlier. I've got them down as third, but say if Tunisia don't show up and we have the other side of Majid Bouguera, who knows what might happen? They might even sneak a second, but it'd be a shame if they didn't get through, because I think on the looks of it, they have a good enough thing that they could put up a good fight in the last 16 match. But I don't think they'll get much further than that, even if they do get through in third place.
And the final team is Mauritania. It's their second tournament. I don't think they're no mugs, to be honest. Last tournament, kept 2 clean sheets out of the 3.
Again, they're another side. We quite often see it, particularly from European media and that, is these sorts of sides are underrated massively. Look, they've got a number of players at European clubs, but it's not just that. They've got a lot of players at peak age. They've got players who have had 20, 30 caps under their belt, and they're in that sort of mid to late 20s, which is exactly where you want them. My worry is all of their goalkeepers are playing at domestic level. They're going to be coming up against world-class attacking footballers, and that might cause a few difficulties. They've not got a great forward line. I think goals are going to be a little hard to come by, but a second successive appearance is a fantastic effort, and ultimately I think they'll fall short. They'll be bottom of the group, but maybe they can nick a point from somewhere. I think all of their games will be pretty close, maybe bar the Mali one.
In terms of going into this as well, they've had terrible records against Mali and Tunisia, big thumpings by both of them. So that doesn't bode well when you think about the psychological element of going into those games. So I think they'll finish 4th, and I think they'll probably come up quite short against Mali and Tunisia, just given the form they've had playing against them before. So for me, it's a great opportunity for them, but I don't think they'll finish much higher than 4th.
those are our 24 teams of the African Cup of Nations in 2021. Where can you watch the African Cup of Nations if you're based in the UK? Well, you can find out on 2 stations, mainly on Sky Sports. They've got the rights this year compared to Eurosport. And you can watch some games on the BBC. So please do check out your favourite African players on those channels.
Quick question, Craig, because you're not getting out of this. Who do you think's winning AFCON 2021?
For me, I'm going to go with Nigeria.
Nigeria?
Oh.
I'm going to go with Nigeria. And I haven't seen the kit yet. So if the kit's absolutely amazing, I'm going to go for Nigeria.
I was going to say Mali's kit, for me, having looked at them, is possibly the best. But it'd be great to see what people think in the comments below about, because I will say one of the highlights of the AFCON is also the outlandish kits that some of the teams turn out, and it is brilliant.
And that is our preview of the African Cup of Nations 2021, hosted by Cameroon. Let us know in the comment section who you think is going to win this year's tournament and who's going to be the surprise package. Give this video a like, subscribe to the Honest Football Podcast, and you can follow us on Twitter at HonestFootball3. And we'll see you next time.